guys that are up here, see them. We got Amy Dudley on the bass. David Simon, drummer extraordinary. Thanks.
Man, that was awesome. That was great. Love hearing the voices of men join together and sing. It reminds me of Revive. Add another 100, another 200 guys, and man, we just rocked that place. It's great. Looking forward to this coming year. As long as we're a couple introductions, I'd like to make sure you guys know who the men's leadership team is. My name is David Kuhn. Bob Garcia, would you stand up? Bob Williams, Bob Menifee, Doug Montandon, Chad Hendrickson, Paul Montalvo, John Seraphin, John Pack, Danny Burleson, Jay Clark, Eric Arguello, John Merchant, Todd Lambert. These are the guys that just work behind the scenes to put things together for you. We appreciate you guys. Thank you. Bob Menifee was talking about how he loves to hear a man's story. Each of us has a unique story. The Bible says it. We are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which He's prepared in advance for us to do. But we're God's handiwork. God has an amazing story that He has written and is writing in each of our lives. Today we have a chance to hear from a man that really thought he was going to spend his career on the police force, retire from the police force, take advantage of that retirement plan, CalPERS, whatever that is. But God, Proverbs 16:9 says, in their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and He will establish your plans. So our speaker today, he had one plan for his life. God got a hold of his heart, changed direction. After 20 years in law enforcement, gave it up, decided to come into the ministry. I'll let him tell the story. But join me in a big morning welcome for Bill Walmer, Director of High School and College here at Crossroads. Bill Walmer.
Well, good morning. As Dave said, I am the Director of High School and College Ministries here on campus. And that isn't exactly what I've done for the majority of my life. Up until September, I'd been a police officer for 20 years. And that's the weirdest part of my life is that was actually my escape from full-time ministry. And it was a really fun career, though, and it was great. I got to do canine, I got to do detectives, and one of the things that I'm most proud of is that I was on the SWAT team for 8 years before I had left. But obviously, that's not where my story begins, and I really wanted to walk you guys through the process of my testimony. You see, my conversion story, though, is kind of uneventful. I grew up in a single-parent home. My mom worked 2 jobs to put food on the table and put a house over our head. It was one of those homes where we believed in a God, but it wasn't what I know of God today. You see, we went to church Christmas and Easter, and we spent time talking about this God, but we never really dove into who this God really was. And it was a summer between my sophomore and my junior year in high school, on the way to a Giants game with a friend.
Go Giants!
Go Giants! Yeah. Well, okay, we can stop there. Yeah, as a matter of fact, the kind of funny thing is I was thinking I was 16 years old, I was driving myself to the San Francisco Giants game from San Jose. That doesn't happen anymore, does it? Anyways, so my friend asked me a simple question. How do you know you're going to heaven? And as I thought about it, I looked back at conversations I had with my mom or the things that I saw on TV, and I told him, my God would save me. He would let me into heaven because of the good things that I've done. He would look and see that the goods outweighed the bads in my life. Right? How many heard that story before? How many people had thought that in their life? he just left me with a quiet little question, and then we went to the gate. He said, well, where's that written? And I began to process that question. I thought to myself, where is it written? And I started asking him questions. And you see, for me, it was very cerebral. He showed me the Bible and he explained to me. We heard from Matt. He gave us the Romans Road in his rap. And that's what he started with me. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, Romans 3:23. And then we see Romans 6:23, for the wage of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. Romans 10, that if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. And we jump back to Romans 5:1 with a wonderful message. Therefore, since we have been justified through faith, we have peace with God through the Lord Jesus. So it was easy for me. It was a cerebral thing. I thought, there it is. That's all I have to do. And that was my conversion story. But let me tell you, that's where my testimony begins. That is not the end. That is not the thing that I'm here to share with you guys today. And what I hope today for you guys is maybe you don't necessarily identify with the exact ideas in my testimony, but hopefully the themes. Hopefully you'll see some themes, be able to pick those up and go, okay, I can relate to that. Maybe not the specifics. So as I grew in my faith, Jesus began to change me, change my heart, change the way I began to see things around me. Before Jesus, much of my thought was focused on going to college, to have a good job, so I can provide for a family, and so I can have money to have toys and fun stuff and the things that every man wants, right? You know, I wanted to be an engineer or an architect. Well, let me be honest. I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. I mean, who didn't, right? Going through high school, I was an all-league catcher, and I had scouts, and I had people asking, hey, where are you going to go? But there was one caveat. The summer between my junior and senior year, I had won a college, I won a scholarship, thank you, to a Christian college. And I was like, this is where I want to be anyways. I want to be a pastor. And so when these scouts and the coach said, hey, you know, they want to talk to you, I'm like, no. That's not the plan for my life. I want to be a pastor. But I'll tell you what, in the back of my mind, I thought about the comfort and the great things that could come, humanly great things. The great things that could come from going to college on a ride and then maybe even playing in the MLB and getting a good contract and having all that money. But God said no. God said full-time ministry. He said, okay, I will go there, and that's what I will focus on. And during college, as I went through this Christian college, I started an internship at a church in Los Gatos, and it was great. It was awesome at first. You know, I really started to get into serving, and I saw what it meant to be a pastor, and I really thought that this was the direction that God wanted me to go. I was a new Christian with only a few semesters of Christian college behind me. And it quickly started to fall apart. You see, during winter, problems began to surface. And it wasn't necessarily the problems in my life. I was still following, I was still serving, and I was still trying to do what I needed to do and what God called me to do. But it was in the life of the pastor that was mentoring me. Or should I say, who should have been mentoring me. You see, there were problems in his marriage. And it wasn't anything that they could have done. I look back and I see that it was most likely a postpartum thing where his wife was going through some things, some issues, some real mechanical problems in her brain that were really causing her to really cling to him in times when he was needed to be at church, when he was supposed to be mentoring me, or so I thought that's what he was supposed to be doing. You know, it came to a head and eventually they got divorced. And through this process, I thought to myself, if this was full-time ministry, I don't want anything to do with it. This is just beyond what I thought ministry would be like. Isn't it supposed to be easy? It's serving God, right? And so as an 18, 19-year-old kid, my brother was a police officer, and I'd been on ride-alongs. Fast cars, get to play with guns, you know, chase people. I'm sold, right? But the whole time I thought to myself, is this really where God wanted me? Now, honestly, I convinced myself that this was part of my thought process, that looking back, I see that this was more of a cop-out. It was not the way God wanted me to go. It wasn't the path that He had for me, but it was so much easier. See, ministry is hard. Not surprising to anybody in this room, right? And I wasn't making any money. Still not surprising, right? And I could see that young kid in me saying, you really want me to work that hard for so little? Yeah. Those words just came out of my mouth. You see, what did I leave ministry for? I left ministry for comfort, my own comfort. You see, while I was going through the process, I realized that the dreams and the aspirations that I had, owning things, doing things, would be much harder in ministry. When I look back, I can see that was the beginnings of Satan's ruse to keep me off the path that God had me on. Just one little step at a time. It wasn't like that whole deep jump into that dark chasm, that pit of despair. It was one small step at a time. And before I knew it, I was miles away from where God wanted me. But check it out. And this is, some of you might be able to identify with this, is as I'm taking these little steps away from where God wanted me, I kept saying, it's okay because God, I will always serve you. God, I will always be involved in student ministry. But I can tell you that there was always a distraction. Shortly after starting as a police officer, Jen and I got married, my wife. Married 2 kids. We were married in June of 1998. 20 plus years. Woo! We found a church here in town. And we even started a young married couple, young married group. But as young couples do, we had moved around and we never really got rooted. That group fell apart and we would go to church sometimes. We moved back to Manteca. We started to get rooted into another church in town. We started in a young married Bible study again. And that didn't last long. You see, there just wasn't enough time in the day to do all the things that I wanted to do and be connected with people. Something had to be cut from the list. And as you all know, sometimes it's church. Sundays weren't a priority. I started to develop the mindset as long as I got there most of the time, things would be good, right? But remember, I told God that I would always serve Him. But it got to the point that I would serve Him as long as He fit into the spaces that I had opened for Him. Eventually, we did get a little more rooted. And it came at the cost of a few major incidents at work that really shook me to the core. You know, there was an incident where I had a train suicide. And those are not pretty. And I won't bore you with the disgust, but what really shook me was talking to the train conductor. And those guys, if there's any train conductors in the room, you guys see some really gnarly, nasty stuff. What he told me was he could see the person walking away from the tracks. He could see the glow of the headphone wires hanging from her ears. Guys, it was a young girl, 16 years old, with absolutely no hope in the world. The only hope she had was to end her life. And I started playing the scene in my mind, and I could only imagine her walking away with tears streaming down her face as the train approached. And this was the only way out she had. She had no hope. And it really convicted me because I have this nugget. I have this golden get out of jail free card. Jesus. And what was I doing with it? We did get connected to another young married Bible study. And actually there's a couple friends in the group from it still here today. We made deeper connections doing groups became more of a priority. Church became more of a priority for us. And then right around that time, life happens, right? That's when I got into detectives. On my way to the boys' first real kid pitch baseball game. You all know what I'm talking about. T-ball, it's not really baseball. Can I say that on here? Don't mention me. But first kid pitch baseball game. We're on our way. And I got a call out. It was my first call out. So as we pulled up, I dropped my kids off, I dropped my wife off, I turned around and I went back to work. That summer we had 7 people shot in 6 days. We ended up working 14 days straight. We were there every hour except for go home, shower, and then come back. Any more than that, and you weren't a team player. But I kept telling myself, it's okay. It's okay because I'm making really good money. The overtime on those checks was great. And you know what I could do with that money? I could take my family on vacations where we can spend more time together. I could make up for the lost time that I was at work. And it really didn't hit me because we had some really good vacations. But it really didn't hit me until one night, sitting down to dinner, my phone rang. And what you guys will not believe, potentially, is I'm one of those outgoing introverts. Being in this kind of setting, it drains me and it exhausts me, but I love it and I do it because God calls me to it. But I don't talk on the phone because of it. You know, I'm one of those texters. I'm one of that generation, you know. So if my phone rings, something's up. Or it's a solicitor. But in this case, it was in the middle of dinner and my phone rang. And my little guy looked up at me and said, "Daddy, please don't go to work tonight." So that night during dinner, when my phone rang, I got kicked in the gut. And that's really when God started working on me. So we knew it was time to get committed. Jen and I started working with the kids group at the church we were going to. And we were leading worship for them, and we were having a great time. And you know what? God had been blessing us, and we made it a commitment to be there. A couple of years later, the youth pastors at our church resigned. And I was asked to teach in the high school group, and I started thinking, wow, this is the path that I was on 20 years ago, and God is really starting to push me back into it. And the more I did it, the more it caught fire. 6 months later, they hired a new guy, and God continued to work in me. You know, we worked really well together. I would lead worship, or I would teach when he wasn't available, and he really started pouring into me. But we had this kind of difference in philosophies of ministry. And about 9 months ago, God really kicked me in the gut again. In the middle of our winter retreat with our high schoolers, this is a high school group that I'd been involved with for almost 4 years at that point, me and my wife. In the middle of this winter retreat, the speaker said something, and something snapped in my head. And I walked outside, walked down to the dock at Tahoe, 30-degree weather, and I just wrestled with God, and I heard God tell me, it's time to go. Wait, this was one of those wrestling moments because these are our kids. We have just spent 4 years in ministry with them. We have freshmen that are going to be graduating in 2 months, and God is saying to go? That was foreign to me, and I always talked with friends about God doesn't call you away from something, He calls you to something. And I'm hearing God clearly tell me to go. So I sat down with my wife. She's like, yeah, I've heard it. You see, by that time, she had actually been coming here, sneaking away. Thursday nights, right? She'd been coming here because she wasn't getting fed where we were. And even some Sunday mornings after we would hang out with the high school group. High school group was first hour. Big church was the second hour. So after hanging out with high school group, I would go into big church with the kids, and sometimes she would sneak off and come here for 11:30 service. So we had a connection here. But I'm like, God, I don't want it to be easy. We left that church. We left the students that we loved. And we're still in their lives today. But it was one of the hardest things I had ever had to do. We had been at that church for 18 years. And God said, it's time to go. A few years back, God had started prompting me to start a retirement gig. So I went back to school to finish my degree in Bible. And so I looked at Jen and I thought, do you think this is the time for us to jump into full-time ministry? And she's like, no! I said, thank you. I don't want to give up the comfort yet. I'm happy with the pay. I'm happy with what we got. And I'm happy with the way things are going. I don't know if I'm ready for a life change. So I said, okay, we're all together on this one, right? So we began to find our journey to find a new church. And kept coming back here. We kept landing back here, and I couldn't figure out why. And I kept telling God, it's like, this is easy for me. It's comfortable. I know a lot of the people that came here. A lot of the people that had come here from our previous church were family. And so when we would come here, they would accept us as family, but you know what? You all did too. You guys all opened your arms to us. You know, and it wasn't until, I remember my little guy, he always has these words of wisdom. It wasn't until he told me, Dad, I didn't know a pastor could be so cool. That was the Sunday that Pastor B rapped. Right? I'm like, wow. Maybe I should listen to this little one. Maybe this is the place we need to be. So Easter Sunday was our first visit as a family. We went to RC because that's where our kids had been going. And it was an amazing service. And I thought, you know what? This is home. So when Jen and I had heard that the previous youth pastor had resigned, we started to wonder if this was our time. Is this the time to jump into full-time ministry? We still had our doubts. You see, I'm 43. I can't collect retirement until I'm 50. That's a long time, 7 years. How is God going to provide for us in a way that we want to be provided for?
At 50.
So I keep thinking that my retirement gig is a retirement gig and not a leap of faith. And it wasn't until the series on Gideon that Jen and I were sold out. You see, we had a baseball tournament that weekend, so we didn't actually get to see it live, but we watched it on video. And we sat on our couch, and as soon as it was over, Jen walked over to her purse, she got out her checkbook, and we started walking through the checkbook going, we could do without that. We could sell that. We could refinance that. Starbucks is gone. I'm a cop. Starbucks. She crossed that one off the list quick. I'm like, wait a second, you know. But anyways, I have my Starbucks cut back there. I fit that into the budget, but you know what I'm saying? Things had to start getting cut out. But what we realized is that we needed to be committed. We realized that we needed to put our faith in God for Him to provide. And we started knocking on doors. And kept opening them. Knocking on doors, opening them. And then in September, God said, this is it. This is where I want you. And I started here full time. So for some of you, you can relate. You can understand the comfort of what you have, or the comfort of your homes, or the comfort of your jobs. You can relate that sometimes those things can be a distraction. You might be able to relate to my feelings. The ability to do what you want when you want to do it. Justifying the long hours by making sure that you have great vacations. Telling yourself it's okay to miss church because you can watch it online. Not getting connected because you're worried that your family, well, you think that you aren't sharing enough time with them. But check it out. Throughout my life, there's been this one verse that kept coming back up to me. It kept jumping out. Sometimes it smacks me, and sometimes I just have to straight ignore it. And it was a verse written by the half-brother of Jesus. And in his book, he has a bunch of simple, beautiful truths. In James 4:17, we read, if anyone knows the good they ought to do, and he doesn't do it, it is sin for them. So real quick, to get some perspective on this passage, in the beginning of the letter, we see that it is addressed to the 12 nations, the 12 tribes scattered among the nations. James is writing his letter to Messianic Jews who were scattered abroad at the time, Jews who believed in Jesus. And the picture I get when I hear the word scattered is the picture of how Christians live today. Even in this room, we have people who live in Manteca and Ripon. We have people from Escalon and Tracy and even Stockton and Modesto. We're scattered. And in this letter, it is written because just like the Jews did time and time again in the Old Testament, they kept following God for a point. They would get distracted. They would start worshiping other things, and then God would have to come send somebody to wake them up again. So they were taking these new teachings of Jesus, and they were doing that same exact thing. They were letting the cultures that they were living in create a new religion again. Kind of like what I did, the religion of Bill. Take some of the stuff I like about God, some of the stuff that I hear in the Bible that fits with what I'm doing, but still keeping the comfort of home in what I believe and how I believe it and what I do. And this letter is to address those issues. It is as relevant today as it was to the early church. I've read it described as a package of short, challenging wisdom speeches. This epistle is known to be a book about getting into your business so it can challenge how you live. Here's the key. Man, it calls us to wholehearted devotion to Jesus. We see themes of love versus favor. Are we motivated by loving our neighbor, or are we motivated by what we can get from that relationship? He challenges us to genuine faith. He tells us that faith without works is dead. He reminds us the way we use our words shows our character. When you boil it down, James knows that it was easier to think about or to talk about humility and dependence on God. Easier to do those things than actually live it. And he makes the mind of God plain. As we know these things, we are accountable to do them. You see, we used to believe, and we may still have this notion in the back of our mind that sin is being one of those things listed in the Ten Commandments. And when we say to ourselves, I'm not a thief, I'm not an adulterer, and I'm not a murderer. But James takes it one step further and defines what Jesus meant when he tells us that the greatest command is love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. He is telling us, put away your money, or put your money where your mouth is. He is saying, show me, show God, show your families what it means to be devoted to God. If you know the good you ought to do, but you allow yourself to be distracted by the boat in the garage, or the RV on the side of the house, and the Jeep in the driveway, those are my distractions. If you allow your distractions, and if you're honest with yourself and you plug those into that phrase, if we know the good we ought to do, and we don't do it, if we allow ourselves to be distracted, we are missing the mark that Jesus said. How are you loving God with all your heart, soul, and your mind? Now, my story is different than all yours. I'm not telling you guys you need to run right out, quit your jobs, and go into full-time ministry. I know that's not where God has called each one of you. And I look at your faces and I see that each one of you has a call. And God has you where He has you for a reason. And I'm also not telling you that, hey, the vacations you take, they're bad. They're not. I don't want you to hear that. What I want you to know, and what I am telling you, is you need to get committed. You know, it's kind of funny, as I heard this the beginning of today, you guys are all going to think we all had this plan to push you towards groups. But this is a God thing, because I didn't know what we were going to announce today. I didn't know how things were going to go. But what I will tell you is that after reading a book on spiritual formation, which is the idea of discipleship, there are 3 essentials: God's Word, God's Spirit, and God's people. Okay? You need to be committed. You need to be committed to His Word. There is truth in the Bible. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet. Anyone? Remember the song? Sean's got to have to. No? You remember? No. Amy Grant, back in the day? Never mind. Anyways, even he didn't get that one. Sorry. But here's the thing. Yes, sometimes we don't like what we read because it has hard truths in it. But it is our guide. It is an essential. You need to commit to His Word. You need to be committed to His Spirit. You need to allow Him to guide you. Go where He leads you. Get this, get on your knees and ask Him to go before you as He did with the Israelites. And this one could be hard because sometimes the Spirit prompts us to do things that we don't want to do. To give up things that we don't want to give up. And one of the most important things, guys, is commit to God's people. If you're a new Christian or even someone that's just looking at this Jesus thing for the first time, God's people will help you grow in ways that you never could on your own. Proverbs tells us, iron sharpens iron, so does one person to another. But here's the thing, guys. Just like my bad mentor, if you were mentored by a bad mentor, you're not going to see good results. Look around the room. We have great men in here. If you need a mentor, you need to find one in here. We've got great men here. And if there's not somebody here that you can connect with, Dave can hook that up. But here's the thing, is it takes commitment. Going to Revive isn't just enough. Being involved in these things isn't enough. It takes commitment because you have to get real with these people. You have to be able to open up your hearts. You have to be able to open up your lives and say, I'm filthy dirty. Could you help me through this? It takes vulnerability. Which a bunch of men in this group are like, I'm not vulnerable. Put your shoulders back and walk around. But commitment, it takes vulnerability. And once those relationships begin to build, they help you dig deep into the Word of God, and they will help you lean into the guidance of God. And guys, they will help you step out on faith. There is no better place to be than in God's hands. Stepping out in faith, I'll tell you, this was a leap of faith for me. Thank God He has it all in His hands. Because if it was all mine, it had been a mess already. And for those of you guys who are committed, you guys have that small group, rock on, but here's a challenge to you. We need you men to be committed as well. Committed to taking care of His people, serving them, mentoring them, and modeling Christ-like behavior. For the men in the room, for people in the church, but most importantly for your family. And I'll tell you what, you heard it earlier, there are endless opportunities at this church to serve. You know Mrs. T? She could use men, good men like you, to serve in children's ministry. Mark could use good men to show 5th and 6th graders what it means to be a man. Heather Mahoney could use good men like you with the junior hires. I could use men like you with the high school students and the college students. Michael, plug you into CR. That is a great ministry. And guess what? If I haven't mentioned something that you have on your heart, Heather Lee would love to have you as a group leader. Man, we have not been called to sit idly by. We have not been called to sit and watch this life from the sidelines. We have not been called to be that Lone Ranger Christian to try to do it on our own. We've been called to action. We have been called to get our hands dirty with our brothers. We have been called to go and make disciples in our homes, where we work, in our church, and in our community. If we know the good we ought to do and we don't do it, we miss the mark. Let's pray. God, we thank you so much for the men in this room. We thank you so much for the commitment this church has to these small groups, because we know that's where life happens. We know that that's where you can help us clean that mess of our life. And I pray that today Those that are on the fence will jump right in. And those that have a small group, I pray that they are challenged to open their hearts even more so the guys that are around them can help to encourage them, help them to grow in their faith, and help them to be the men that you have called them to be. We thank you for this time, God. We pray that every man here who came is blessed and will come again. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Thanks a lot, guys.